This is Morgan Fletcher, and I will be interviewing Gracie Fletcher about her second language acquisition experience. So, Miss Fletcher, can you start by describing your childhood for me?
Well, I'm 62 years old. I was raised in Corpus Christi in the 1960s, and I grew up in a low-income neighborhood, and it was all Hispanics, and I went to an all-Hispanic school.
And can you describe your second language acquisition experience overall?
I learned how to speak English when I went to first grade because I did not go to kindergarten. We did not really have kindergarten, so it was a sink or swim situation.
And did your classmates also speak Spanish, or was there anyone who knew English besides the teachers?
Only the teachers, because all the kids that went to school with me were my neighbors, my friends, and we were not allowed to speak Spanish, and only the teacher taught in English and spoke in English.
That's very interesting. So were you ever able to speak Spanish at school, or did you ever try to speak Spanish?
No, we could not. We were not allowed to speak Spanish. If we did speak Spanish, we were sent to the office, and we did not understand what the teacher was teaching a lot of the time. So at recess, we would hide and away. We would go away from the teachers, so we could speak in Spanish to each other, and we would all say, "Okay, what did you get? And what did you get?" And between all of us, whatever each of us got, we shared it, and that's how we would learn what the teacher was saying.
How did learning English impact your family when you were a child?
Well, because when I got to be about in the second grade, my English was very proficient. I'm one of the lucky ones that swam. I didn't sink, so I was the interpreter for my mom and dad because I was the only one at home left. I was the baby of the family, so I would do all their interpreting with the doctors or welfare or any kind of thing like that would come around. So that it was good for them, but it was also bad for me because I would have to be absent a lot from school because I'd have to go to doctor visits and welfare office or whatever with them.
Once you were fluent in English, when did you use English as a child?
All the time, at school and anywhere except at home. I tried to use it as much as I could because I knew that was the way out of the neighborhood that I was in and the situation I was in.
What would you say your motivation was for learning English? Or were you not given a choice of if you wanted to speak English or learn English?
We weren't given a choice. We had to learn it, and in order to make it in school, I had to learn English. And then I started noticing that everything was in English because I never really got out of my neighborhood. But, when I got a little older and started noticing that everything's in English, so therefore you have to know English in order to get anywhere in life. Well, here in the United States. So you have to know English.
And as a child, how did learning English affect your proficiency in your academic Spanish?
I had no academic Spanish because I learned English too young, and it was the way that we had no bilingual education, so therefore it was not an additive program. It was a more subtractive program. So they took away my language. So I did not learn academic English or academic writing either in Spanish.
In your school, did your teachers teach you guys English, or they only taught in English?
They taught in English. Nobody ever taught us English like we do nowadays, and in the bilingual programs in school. you teach kids English, so you can add it to their to their Spanish. But no, we were taught in English. So if you knew it, you knew it. If you didn't, you didn't.
Now I'd like to move on and ask you about how your experience impacts you today in being bilingual. So, in the text that I'm reading, Gass and Selinker note that there are many classifications for bilingual speakers. Specifically, one can be considered a balanced bilingual, meaning that they have equivalent mastery of two languages. Another classification is a dominant bilingual, in which they have a greater proficiency in one language over the other. Out of balanced and bilingual, which type would you consider yourself?
Probably the dominant, because I'm better in English because that's all I've spoken, and I can read and write and communicate much better in English. I can do the same in Spanish now because I've taken a lot of Spanish courses, so I can read and write, but my proficiency is better in English. When I translate, I can translate better from the Spanish to the English, rather than I can also translate from the English to the Spanish, but it's a little bit harder.
Furthermore, also in the text, Gass and Selinker mentioned that there is also a coordinate bilingual in which the two languages are learned in distinctively separate contexts. Would you agree that you could also consider yourself a coordinate bilingual because you learned Spanish at home and English at school?
Yes, because no English was spoken in my household.
And another point that I noticed in the text was that Gass and Selinker also discussed the phenomenon of code switching for bilingual individuals. And this, it refers to the use of more than one language in one conversation. What is your experience regarding code switching?
I do a lot of code switching because I am a Texan, and I was born and raised in Texas, and in Texas we do that a lot. When I'm with friends, I code switch, which is called Spanglish. I do a lot of Spanglish. When I'm in an academic situation like at school and I'm speaking with parents, or somebody from our bilingual department and they're speaking to me in Spanish or English, I have to watch myself very carefully to stay in one language, whether it's English or Spanish.
And lastly, looking back on your experience learning English, do you think a bilingual program would have benefited you or put you at a disadvantage?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it would have been an advantage because I think I would have learned a lot more because I wouldn't have struggled so much like I did. So my studies, struggled, well, suffered. However, I think that I might have used my Spanish as a crutch to not learn English as quickly and as proficiently as I did. So, I don't know because I didn't experience that, but I do notice it now in a lot of our students in school that it is a crutch and they go ahead and speak in Spanish, whereas my first language is always English. So.
Well, thank you for your time, Ms. Fletcher, and that concludes our interview.
Thank you.